In the heart of a quiet suburban neighborhood, where the nights were often filled with the soft hum of nature and the occasional distant bark of a dog, there lay a secret unrest within the walls of a quaint, ivy-clad house. This was the home of Michael and Anna, a couple that, to any onlooker, seemed to be the very picture of domestic bliss. Yet, beneath this veneer of perfection, a dark undercurrent was beginning to stir. Michael, a dedicated librarian with a passion for literature and a mind often lost in the worlds of books, had started to experience something deeply unsettling. Night after night, as the world around him drifted into peaceful slumber, his own mind embarked on a harrowing journey.
It starts the same way each time,
I recall telling Anna one morning, the remnants of the night's terror still lingering in my voice.
I'm standing in our room, in the stillness of the night, and there's this overwhelming sense of dread that something terrible is about to happen.
In these nightmares, I see myself, or at least some twisted version of myself, doing the unthinkable, harming Anna, my beloved wife. The woman who, with her gentle smile and warm, inviting eyes, had always been my anchor in a world that often felt too vast and confusing. As Michael narrated his nightmares to Anna over their morning coffee, her face, usually so full of warmth and understanding, couldn't help but betray a flicker of concern. She reached across the table, placing her hand over his, a silent gesture of reassurance. But deep down, she couldn't shake off a creeping sense of unease. In the library where Michael worked, surrounded by towering shelves of books, each whispering tales of distant lands and forgotten times, he found temporary refuge from his tormented nights. Yet, even in the midst of this literary sanctuary, his thoughts were never far from the dark visions that haunted his sleep.
I try to lose myself in the stories,
He thought, running his fingers over the spines of the books.
but even here, in the midst of these silent witnesses, I feel as though I'm being watched, haunted by the specter of my own nightmares.
As days turned into weeks, the line between Michael's waking hours and his nightmares began to blur. Sleep, once a respite, had become a battleground where his deepest fears came to life. He began to sleepwalk, his actions mimicking the disturbing scenes from his dreams. Anna, growing increasingly worried, would find him wandering the house at night, a distant, vacant look in his eyes. Her attempts to wake him were met with incoherent mumblings, his mind trapped in the throes of his night terrors. It was on one such night, as a storm raged outside, that Anna discovered Michael standing by their bed, his hands clenched into fists, sweat beading on his forehead. The look in his eyes was sheer terror, a man battling an unseen enemy.
Michael, wake up! You're scaring me!
Anna pleaded, her voice trembling with fear. Her words seemed to reach him, pulling him back from the edge of his nightmare. As he awoke, the reality of what he had been on the brink of doing hit him with crushing force. The horror that I could harm Anna, even in my sleep, became a tangible fear, a possibility that I couldn't ignore anymore. In the days that followed, the once peaceful home of Michael and Anna became a place of silent tension. Anna's smiles were now tinged with worry, her laughter a little too forced. Michael, grappling with the guilt and fear that his nightmares could become reality, felt a growing chasm between them. He knew he had to seek help, to unravel the mystery of his night terrors before they destroyed the life he cherished. But the question that haunted him, echoing through the corridors of his mind, was whether he was ready to confront the darkness that lurked within him. As the first chapter of their story closed, the night once again enveloped their home, a home where shadows whispered secrets and a man's mind teetered on the edge of an abyss. The descent into darkness had begun, and the path ahead was shrouded in uncertainty and fear. In the quiet hours of the morning, when the world was still shrouded in darkness, Michael found himself staring at the ceiling, his mind a tumultuous sea of thoughts. The nightmares had intensified, each night a little more vivid, a little more terrifying. Sleep had become his adversary, and the sanctity of his bedroom now felt like a prison.
The dreams, they're getting worse.
I whispered to Anna as she slept beside me, unaware of the storm raging in my mind.
It's like I'm losing my grip on what's real and what's not.
With each passing day, the lines between his nightmares and reality grew increasingly blurred. Objects seemed to move on their own, shadows stretched and twisted into grotesque shapes, and whispers echoed in the silence, all orchestrating a symphony of paranoia that played relentlessly in Michael's mind. At work, among the rows of books and the scent of aged paper, a constant haze now clouded Michael's once sharp focus. His colleagues noticed the change, the dark circles under his eyes, the way he jumped at the slightest sound. They whispered among themselves, their concern growing with each passing day. Driven by desperation, Michael decided to seek help. He found himself sitting in the office of Dr. Evelyn Hart, a renowned psychologist known for her expertise in the realm of the subconscious.
So, Michael, tell me about these nightmares.
Dr. Hart began, her voice a soothing balm to his frayed nerves. As he recounted the horrors that plagued his nights, Michael felt a sense of relief, as if unburdening his soul of a heavy weight. Dr. Hart listened intently, her eyes reflecting a deep understanding of the human psyche.
These dreams, they could be a manifestation of subconscious fears or desires.
She suggested, her words echoing in Michael's mind.
Sometimes our minds create these scenarios as a way to process unresolved issues.
Leaving Dr. Hart's office, Michael felt a flicker of hope. Maybe there was a way to untangle the web of his nightmares, to find the root of his terror and confront it. But as the days went by, the line between his waking life and the nightmares continued to blur. Anna's voice seemed distant, as if she were calling to him from the other side of a thick fog. The once familiar streets he walked seemed to twist and turn into a maze, leading him further into confusion.
I don't know what's real anymore.
I confessed to Dr. Hart during one of our sessions.
It's like I'm living in a constant state of fear, waiting for the next nightmare to begin.
Dr. Hart nodded, her expression one of deep concern.
It's important that we address these fears, Michael. Ignoring them will only give them more power over you.
But as much as he tried, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister was lurking beneath the surface of his nightmares, something that threatened to consume him entirely. One night, as he lay in bed, the familiar sense of dread creeping over him, Michael felt a sudden chill. The room seemed to darken, the shadows growing thicker, more menacing. And then he heard it, a low, guttural growl that seemed to emanate from the very walls around him. Frozen with fear, he watched as a dark figure emerged from the shadows, its features obscured, its presence malevolent. Michael tried to scream, but no sound escaped his lips. He was trapped in his own nightmare, unable to wake up, unable to escape. When he finally awoke, the room was bathed in the soft light of dawn. Anna lay beside him, her face peaceful in sleep. But the terror of the night still clung to him, a reminder that his mind was no longer his own. As the days passed, Michael's paranoia deepened. He saw the dark figure everywhere, in the reflections of windows, in the corners of rooms, always just out of sight. He knew it was a figment of his imagination, a creation of his tortured mind, but that knowledge did nothing to ease his fear.
I'm losing myself, Dr. Hart.
He admitted during a therapy session, his voice barely above a whisper.
I'm afraid of what I might do, what I might become.
Dr. Hart looked at him, her eyes filled with a mix of compassion and determination.
We'll find a way through this, Michael. You're not alone in this fight.
But even as she spoke, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that the dark figure from his nightmares was waiting, biding its time. As the therapy session ended, Michael felt as if he stood at the edge of an abyss, his mind a battlefield where reality and nightmares waged a relentless war. The question that haunted him was not whether he would fall, but when. The shadows of his mind were closing in, and escape seemed like a distant dream. The days began to melt into each other, each indistinguishable from the last, as Michael found himself sinking deeper into an abyss of his own making. The library, once a sanctuary of solace and quietude, had transformed into a stronghold of torment, its once comforting walls now echoing with the whispers of his fractured psyche. In his relentless quest for answers, Michael delved into the obscure and arcane. Books on ancient rituals, cultural beliefs about dreams and the subconscious, and treatises on the darker aspects of the human mind piled up on his desk. His eyes, once bright with the joy of discovery, now bore the haunted look of a man desperate to find meaning in the madness that consumed him.
I just need to understand,
I would mutter to myself, poring over texts late into the night, the glow of the desk lamp casting long, sinister shadows across the room.
There has to be an answer, a key to unlock the door of these nightmares.
Anna watched helplessly as the man she loved disappeared into a world of shadows and theories. Her attempts to reach out, to bridge the growing chasm between them, were met with distant nods and vacant stares. The Michael she knew, the kind-hearted librarian with a love for stories and a gentle smile, was slipping away, replaced by a stranger consumed by obsession. At night, the house felt colder, emptier, as if it too mourned the loss of the warmth and love that once filled its rooms. Anna lay awake, listening to the sound of Michael's erratic breathing, each gasp a reminder of the distance between them. One evening, as a storm raged outside, Michael stumbled upon a theory that seemed to resonate with his turmoil. The ancient belief in dreamwalkers, entities that traverse the dreamscape, influencing and manipulating the minds of the sleeping. The concept struck a chord within him, igniting a flicker of recognition.
Yes, that's it.
I thought, my heart racing with a mix of fear and exhilaration.
It's not just my subconscious. There's something else, something external influencing my dreams.
He became fixated on the idea, spending hours researching and documenting every occurrence, every detail of his nightmares that aligned with the lore of the dreamwalkers. His walls were soon covered with notes and clippings, a chaotic tangle of obsession. Anna's concern turned to fear as she witnessed the transformation. The Michael she knew was being consumed by a world of shadows and nightmares, his grip on reality loosening with each passing day. One night, as Michael sat in his study, surrounded by his notes and books, the air thick with the scent of old paper and desperation, he heard it again, the low, menacing growl that had haunted his dreams. But this time, it was different. It was real, echoing through the room, sending a chill down his spine.
I know you're there.
He whispered into the darkness, his voice trembling.
Show yourself.
The shadows seemed to shift, to coalesce into a form that was both there and not there, a presence that defied the laws of the physical world. Michael's heart pounded in his chest, a mixture of terror and fascination gripping him. But as quickly as it appeared, the presence vanished, leaving him alone in the silence of his study. The storm outside had calmed, and in its wake, a heavy sense of foreboding settled over the house. In the days that followed, Anna watched as Michael's sanity frayed at the edges. His conversations with her became disjointed, his thoughts scattered. He spoke of the dreamwalkers as if they were real, as if they were the key to understanding the terror that plagued him.
I'm close to finding the answer,
he would say, his eyes wild with a fervor that bordered on madness.
I just need more time.
But time was a luxury they no longer had. The gap between them had grown into a chasm, and Anna felt a growing sense of dread that something terrible was on the horizon, something that would shatter the fragile remnants of their life together. As the storm clouds gathered once more, casting dark shadows across the land, Michael stood at the window of his study, staring into the abyss that had become his reality. The lines between the waking world and the realm of nightmares had blurred into obscurity, and he was left adrift in a sea of darkness, with no shore in sight. In this realm where shadows whispered secrets and dreams melded with reality, Michael's journey into the depths of his mind had only just begun. The unraveling was complete, and what lay ahead was a path shrouded in mystery and fraught with peril. As the days melted into a blur of sleepless nights and restless days, Michael found himself adrift in the churning waters of his own psyche, where the echoes of the past reverberated with a haunting persistence. It was during one of these sleep-deprived nights that the dam holding back the flood of suppressed memories finally broke. The memories came rushing back in a torrent of vivid, horrifying flashes. He was a child again, no more than 10 years old, his younger self's hands clutching the cold metal of the playground fence. The scene unfolded before his eyes with a clarity that made his heart race. A man, haggard and wild-eyed, confronting a stranger. Words were exchanged, their voices rising in anger. And then, the glint of a knife, a spray of blood, a life extinguished in a matter of seconds.
I saw him die.
I whispered into the darkness of my study, the memory slicing through the years with a razor-sharp edge.
I saw it all, and I did nothing.
The trauma of witnessing such a brutal act had been buried deep within Michael's subconscious, locked away in a vault of denial and forgotten nightmares. But now, it had resurfaced with a vengeance, coloring his dreams with its bloody hues. The hallucinations began soon after, blurring the lines between his waking life and the nightmares that haunted him. Shadows took on menacing forms, whispers filled the air, and the faces of strangers morphed into those of the man he had seen killed all those years ago. At work, Michael's colleagues began to give him a wide berth, their concern turning to unease as they watched him mutter to himself, his eyes darting around as if seeing things they could not. Books and papers piled up on his desk, untouched, as he lost himself in the enigma of his mind. Anna, in her attempts to bridge the growing divide, found herself recoiling in fear as Michael's behavior became more erratic. He would wake up screaming in the middle of the night, his body drenched in sweat, his eyes wild with fear. During the day he was distant, his mind preoccupied with the demons that now plagued him.
I don't know who you are anymore.
Anna said one evening, her voice trembling with emotion.
You're slipping away from me, Michael. I'm losing you.
But Michael was too far gone, too lost in the echoes of the past that resounded in his head. He began to see the man from his childhood everywhere, in the faces of passers-by, in the shadows of the library, even in his own reflection. Driven by a desperate need to make sense of the chaos, Michael delved deeper into his research on dreamwalkers, convinced that they were the key to his salvation. He scoured ancient texts and obscure writings, searching for a way to banish the nightmares and the visions that tormented him. One night, as he sat hunched over his desk, the dim light of the lamp casting long shadows across the room, a sudden realization struck him. The dreamwalkers were not just figments of myth and legend. They were manifestations of his own trauma, his mind's way of coping with the horrors he had witnessed as a child.
It's me,
he said aloud, his voice barely above a whisper.
I'm the dreamwalker. I'm the one haunting myself.
But this revelation did little to ease his torment. The nightmares continued, each more vivid and terrifying than the last. He was trapped in a cycle of fear and despair, unable to break free from the grip of his own mind. As the days passed, Michael's grasp on reality loosened further. He began to speak incoherently, his thoughts disjointed and fragmented. He would spend hours staring into space, lost in a world that only he could see. Anna, watching the man she loved disappear before her eyes, felt a sense of helplessness that was almost suffocating. She reached out to Dr. Hart, desperate for any guidance, any lifeline that could save Michael from the abyss. But even as she sought help, Anna knew that the battle was far from over. The echoes of the past had awakened something within Michael, something dark and uncontrollable. And as the storm clouds gathered once more, casting their ominous shadows over the land, she feared that the worst was yet to come. In the heart of the labyrinth, where the line between dreams and reality was forever blurred, Michael stood alone, a man haunted by the echoes of a traumatic past. The spiral had begun, and there was no turning back. In the confines of his once cherished home, Michael's world had shrunk to the dimly lit corners of his study, a maze of books, papers, and fragmented thoughts. The man who once took pride in his appearance, whose gentle demeanor had been a source of comfort, was now a shadow of his former self. His hair, unkempt and graying, hung in wild disarray. His clothes were stained and worn, and his once kind eyes were now hollow, lost in a perpetual state of confusion and fear. Anna, observing the drastic change, felt a growing sense of dread. The man she had married, the one who had always been her rock, was slipping further into an abyss from which she feared he might never return. His neglect of personal hygiene was a stark reminder of the depth of his descent. She found herself recoiling at his touch, his once familiar embrace now feeling foreign and threatening.
I'm scared, Michael.
She confessed one evening, her voice choked with emotion.
I don't know what's happening to you, but it's like I don't even know you anymore.
But Michael was barely present, his mind ensnared in the brambles of his own making. The nightmares that had once terrorized him in his sleep were now his constant companions, blurring the line between the waking world and the realm of dreams. Driven by his obsession, Michael began to see patterns and connections where none existed. He became convinced that the dreamwalkers were not just a manifestation of his trauma, but were real entities, manipulating him, guiding his every move.
I'm not in control anymore,
he whispered to himself, his eyes scanning the room, as if expecting the shadows to come alive.
They're everywhere, watching me, controlling me.
His paranoia reached a fever pitch when he visited Dr. Hart for what would become a pivotal session. As he sat across from her, his eyes darting around the room, he was overcome with a sudden, irrational suspicion.
You're part of this, aren't you?
He accused, his voice rising with each word.
You're one of them, trying to manipulate me, to keep me trapped in this nightmare.
Dr. Hart, taken aback by the intensity of his accusation, tried to reason with him.
Michael, you're not well. These thoughts, these fears, they're a product of your mind's attempt to cope with trauma. We can work through this together.
But Michael was beyond reach, his mind a swirling vortex of conspiracy and mistrust. He stormed out of the office, his steps echoing in the empty hallway, a man consumed by the demons of his own creation. Back at home, Anna watched helplessly as Michael retreated further into his world of shadows and delusions. He would spend hours talking to himself, his conversations a mix of incoherent ramblings and angry outbursts. The house, once filled with laughter and love, now echoed with the sounds of his torment. The rooms were cluttered with his research, a chaotic jumble of papers, books, and scribbled notes that seemed to mirror the disarray of his mind. Anna, torn between her love for Michael and her fear for her own safety, found herself at a crossroads. She reached out to family and friends, seeking advice, but the man she described was a stranger to them, a far cry from the Michael they knew.
I don't know what to do.
She confided in her sister during a late-night phone call.
I'm afraid of him, of what he might do, but I can't just leave him like this.
Her sister's words were a cold comfort, a reminder of the helplessness of their situation.
You need to think about your safety, Anna. You can't help him if you're in danger.
The days passed in a blur, each one indistinguishable from the last. Michael's grip on reality loosened, his moments of lucidity growing fewer and farther between. The man who once stood as a pillar of strength and stability was now lost in the house of mirrors of his own mind, a prisoner of the nightmares that had consumed him. Anna, watching the love of her life disappear into the shadows, knew that she had to make a decision that would not only affect her future, but would also determine the fate of the man she still loved, despite the darkness that had enveloped him. In the heart of his mind, where reality and fantasy merged into an indistinguishable haze, Michael's journey into the depths of his mind had taken a sinister turn. The lines between truth and illusion had been erased, leaving him adrift in a sea of paranoia and fear. And as the storm clouds gathered once more, casting their ominous shadows over the land, the path ahead seemed fraught with danger and uncertainty. In the dwindling light of an overcast afternoon, the house that once echoed with the laughter and love of Michael and Anna now stood silent, its walls bearing witness to the unraveling of a mind and a marriage. It was in this heavy silence that Anna, her hands trembling with a mix of fear and resolve, discovered the diary, Michael's private chronicle of his descent into madness. The diary lay hidden beneath a stack of musty books, its pages filled with Michael's frantic scrawlings, a disturbing mirror to the nightmares that had taken over their lives. As Anna turned each page, her heart raced with a growing sense of horror. The words, inked in a frenzied hand, spoke of shadows and whispers, of a dreamwalker haunting his sleep, of a terror so profound it blurred the lines between reality and the macabre world of his nightmares.
I can't stay,
Anna whispered to herself, the decision cementing in her heart as she read his tormented entries.
This isn't the man I married. This isn't the life I chose.
The confrontation was inevitable. As night fell, casting long shadows across the room, Anna faced Michael, the diary clutched in her hands like a shield. Michael, his eyes hollow and distant, seemed like a specter, a ghost of the man she once knew.
Michael, what is this?
Anna's voice broke the silence, her words heavy with emotion.
These writings, they're terrifying. You're terrifying.
Michael looked at her, a flicker of confusion crossing his haunted expression.
It's the only way to understand, Anna. The dreams, the shadows, they're trying to tell me something.
No, Michael.
Anna countered, her voice rising with a mix of fear and desperation.
It's not real. It's all in your head. You need help, more than I can give.
The air between them was electric, charged with the weight of unspoken fears and pent-up emotions. Anna, her resolve hardening, took a step back, distancing herself from the man who had become a stranger to her.
I'm leaving, Michael,
she declared, her voice steady despite the tears that threatened to spill from her eyes.
I can't be a part of this anymore. I can't watch you destroy yourself.
Michael's reaction was one of bewildered hurt, a child lost and confused.
But I need you, Anna. You're the only one who can help me navigate this.
It's too late,
Anna said, her decision irrevocable.
I can't save you from yourself, Michael. I can't drown with you. First thing tomorrow, I'm going to my sister's house.
The tension in the room was palpable, a tangible entity that enveloped them in its suffocating grasp. Michael reached out to her, a plea in his eyes, but Anna recoiled, her mind made up.
Anna, please. Please don't leave me alone in the dark.
But Anna walked away to pack her bags, each step a painful echo in the quiet house. The bedroom door closed behind her with a finality that was deafening, leaving Michael alone in the shadows that had consumed his mind. The breaking point had been reached, the fracture in their relationship too deep to mend. Anna, stepping out into the cool night air later that evening, felt a mixture of relief and heartbreak. She was about to leave behind not just a house, but a life, a love that had been irrevocably tainted by the nightmares that haunted Michael. The storm that night was unlike any that had come before, its winds howling like the cries of tormented souls, its lightning illuminating the darkened sky with flashes of spectral light. Inside the small, cluttered house, where the remnants of a once happy life lay strewn about in disarray, Michael found himself caught in the throes of a nightmare so vivid, so visceral, it felt more real than any reality he had ever known. In this dream, the line between the waking world and the realm of sleep was not just blurred, it was obliterated. He stood in their bedroom, the air thick with a sense of impending doom, a feeling of inevitability that clung to him like a second skin. The shadows seemed to dance around him, whispering secrets in a language only he could understand.
I must do it,
I thought, my mind detached, as if observing the scene from afar.
It's the only way to end this, to free us both from this torment.
In his dissociated state, Michael moved with a somber inevitability, his actions dictated by the twisted logic of the dream. Anna, asleep in their bed, was oblivious to the nightmare that was about to unfold, her chest rising and falling in the peaceful rhythm of slumber. The knife, cold and unyielding, felt heavy in his hand, a weight that was more than just physical, a burden of all the fears, the pain, the confusion that had plagued him for so long. And then, with a movement that was both deliberate and detached, Michael brought the knife down. The sound that followed, a choked gasp, a soft thud, was drowned out by the raging storm outside. But as the dream began to dissipate, giving way to the harsh light of reality, Michael found himself standing in their bedroom, the knife in his hand, blood, a stark, shocking red, staining the sheets. The horror of what he had done hit him with the force of a tidal wave, pulling him under into a sea of despair and disbelief.
No, this can't be.
He stammered, dropping the knife as if it were a burning coal.
Anna, oh God, please wake up.
But Anna did not move, did not wake. The woman who had been his companion, his confidant, his love, lay still and silent, a tragic tableau of his own making. The realization of his actions shattered the last remnants of Michael's sanity. He fell to his knees, his screams of anguish mingling with the roar of the storm, a symphony of grief and madness that echoed through the empty house. As the minutes ticked by, each one stretching into an eternity of pain and regret, Michael's mind fractured, splintering into a million pieces. He was lost in a fable of his own making, a maze with no exit, no escape. Not being aware of his action, he picked up his phone and dialed the police, and in a very monotone, almost otherworldly tone, simply said,
I did it. I took her from this world.
He dropped the phone and remained like a statue until they came for him. The police found him there, still on his knees, his hands covered in blood, his eyes vacant and unseeing. They spoke to him, but their words were like distant echoes, lost in the void that his mind had become. The journey from their home to the police station was a blur, the world outside the car window a swirling miasma of colors and shapes. Michael's thoughts were a jumbled mess, a chaotic jumble of memories, fears, and regrets. In the interrogation room, under the harsh glare of the fluorescent lights, Michael sat in silence, his mind adrift in a sea of despair. The questions the detectives asked were meaningless, their words failing to penetrate the fog that enveloped him.
I did it,
he whispered, the words slipping out in a breathy exhale.
I killed her, in my dream, in my nightmare.
But his confession was not a release, not a catharsis. It was an admission of a reality too painful to bear, a truth that was too heavy for his shattered psyche to carry. As the hours passed, the details of that night became clearer, the events unfolding in a slow, inexorable march toward the tragic conclusion. Michael's descent into madness, his obsession with the dreamwalkers, his blurring of the lines between dreams and reality, all of it culminating in a moment of unspeakable horror. The final nightmare had ended, but for Michael, the real nightmare had just begun. He was charged with Anna's murder, his trial a mere formality, the outcome a foregone conclusion. In the stark, barren cell, where the passage of time was marked only by the faint light that filtered through the small barred window, Michael sat in silence, a solitary figure engulfed by the shadows of his own mind. The walls, cold and unyielding, seemed to close in on him, a physical manifestation of the guilt and despair that weighed heavily on his soul. Arrested for the murder of his beloved Anna, Michael's life had unraveled, the thread of his sanity frayed beyond repair. The trial, a blur of faces and voices, had ended with the inevitable verdict: guilty. The evidence, coupled with his own fragmented confession, left no room for doubt, no glimmer of hope. As he sat in his cell, the memories of Anna haunted him, her laughter, her warmth, now forever silenced by his own hand. The irony of his situation, a psychologist who had lost his mind, a man who had dedicated his life to understanding the human psyche, now a prisoner of his own fractured thoughts, was not lost on him.
I was supposed to help others, to bring people to new worlds through books.
He thought, his voice a mere whisper in the solitude of his cell.
But I couldn't even save myself. Couldn't save the one person who meant everything to me.
The days melded into one another, each indistinguishable from the last. The other inmates, the guards, the brief interactions with his lawyer, all were distant, muted, as if part of a dream he could not wake from. The only reality that remained was the crushing weight of his guilt, the unrelenting torment of his memories. In the quiet moments when the prison was still, Michael would close his eyes and drift back to the days before the nightmares began. He remembered the way Anna's eyes sparkled when she laughed, the gentle touch of her hand, the warmth of her embrace. But these memories, once a source of joy, were now tinged with pain, a reminder of what he had lost, of what he had destroyed. His mind, once sharp and analytical, now wandered through the murky waters of confusion and despair. The theories and research that had once consumed him, the pursuit of understanding the dreamwalkers, now seemed like the ramblings of a madman, the desperate grasping of a mind unraveling at the seams.
I was lost in a reality of my own making.
He realized, the clarity of the thought piercing through the fog of his mind.
I let the shadows consume me, let my fears become my reality.
As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, Michael's existence in the prison became a mere shadow of a life. He was a ghost, haunting the corridors of his own mind, trapped in a world where the line between the subconscious and reality had been irrevocably blurred. In the solitude of his cell, Michael reflected on the tragic irony of his situation. The man who had once sought to understand the mysteries of the mind was now a victim of his own psyche, a cautionary tale of the dangers that lurked in the depths of the human subconscious.
The mind is a fragile thing.
He mused, his voice echoing in the emptiness of his cell.
A delicate balance of thoughts and emotions, easily tipped, easily broken.
In the end, Michael's journey through the labyrinth of his mind had brought him to a place of understanding, albeit too late to save himself or Anna. He realized that the monsters he had feared, the shadows that had haunted him, were of his own creation, born from the unresolved trauma and fears that he had buried deep within himself. As he sat in his cell, the light fading into darkness, Michael came to accept his fate. He was a man consumed by the shadows of his mind, a prisoner not just of the walls that confined him, but of the memories and guilt that shackled his soul. And so, the story of Michael, a tale of love, loss, and the fragile nature of the human mind, came to a close. In the shadows of his cell, where the line between the subconscious and reality was forever blurred, Michael remained, a testament to the tragic irony of a mind lost in its own recipe.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Quantum Dispatches and stay tuned next week for another thrilling adventure. Thank you for listening.